So today we're going to go over understanding Google Publisher policies for monetization. So I'm Marissa with the Platform Quality team, and I've also got Meg here.
Hello.
So we're going to start with the role of the Ezoic Platform Quality and Compliance team. So as you know, Ezoic offers the ability to use a lot of different third-party ad networks through our placeholders. And they all have different policies, especially Google. And if you've taken a look at those policies, which I hope you have, there's a lot of them. And not only is there a lot of them, but some of them may be vague, maybe a little bit confusing. So we're really here as a resource to understand those policies and make sure all of our publishers are following them. And then we also have systems to detect issues so that we can reduce or eliminate violations, before they happen, to help you guys out. So if you do hear from us, we may be asking you to fix something, change something a little bit. We may be able to fix something. But really what we're trying to do is get those violations as low as possible. And if you do get a violation, then we're here to help. So if you reach out to your account manager, they can help you or we can help you fix the violation, appeal the violation, really work as sort of a mediary. So really what we're trying to do is keep the platform clean, keep your sites clean, and it's really a win-win for everybody.
So as a general overview, this is where you would find your AdSense violations. So if you're logged into your AdSense account, on the left-hand column under Account Policy Center, this is where you will list, it will list all the violations. Google will also send you an email with the information. But what you do want to see is a nice clean policy center. Occasionally you get violations, and that's not a big deal, that's okay, as long as you take action. So there's two types of violations: page level violation, which affects a specific URL. So this can be something that if you have sexual content on the page, you would see a violation for this. And then the other one is site level violation that affects the monetization of the entire site. And this typically has to do with invalid traffic or invalid activity. And then within the policy center is where you will find information about that violation. It will show you the URL, the reason for the violation, information about the violation, when it was enforced, and where you can appeal to. So if you see no under the must fix, this means that the content most likely falls under restricted content, which we're going to go over later on in this presentation. So you don't have to fix the violation. It won't cause your AdSense to be disabled. But if you see yes, that is the one you really need to take action on as soon as possible, because leaving those, and if those stack up, can affect your entire AdSense account, and it can get disabled. So those are really important to take action on. And if you see yes, you have two options. One, you can remove the AdSense ad code from that page completely and then appeal, or fix the issues on that page and then appeal. So now we're going to talk a little bit about different ad placement policies that we see and violations we see come up a lot. So pushing content down below the fold. This one we see come up a lot on mobile specifically, but occasionally we do see it on desktop. So it's important to know and understand this issue. So this term above the fold or below the fold comes from newspapers. So if you imagine picking up the newspaper and that fold is everything that you would see, the content you would see. So in this example, you can see your full website, but then on the right hand, you see that that's what the user sees. So it's the first viewport of what the user comes to the site and sees. And so it's super important that, that these ads aren't pushing all the content down below. These layouts make it really hard for users to distinguish between content and ads. And it's important to note that images and titles do not count as content above the fold. So what we recommend having is at least three lines of text above, so that the users are really engaging and understand what they're seeing is content and not ads. I also recommend reviewing different types of pages, because different templates look different with the ads, and different devices. And just like continuously reviewing your pages and making sure that they're compliant and that the ads aren't the first thing that the users see.
So the next policy we're going to go over is misrepresentative content ad labeling. So as you can see on the left, these are violating examples. So anything saying suggested articles, comment below, something that makes the user think that they can engage with the website in some way or get more content. because that's going to cause accidental clicks. And really a lot of these policies are avoiding those types of accidental clicks. Users should only be clicking on ads that they are actually interested in. And on the right, you can see an acceptable example, which shows sponsored links. There's really only two labels that are allowed with Google, and that's sponsored links and advertisements. And while it may seem that like it would be only on purpose that you would do this to put accidental or incorrect ad labels, it does happen accidentally all the time. So let's say there's a site that has a map and there's a header in big letters that says map with a semicolon, and then there's a big ad underneath. And perhaps they didn't realize that the ad was showing in that space. So it's really important to look at top landing pages, make sure that you're looking to see that ads and placeholders are where you want them to be. Check on different device types. For those types of things where it's an accident, like maybe it's a violation, it's easy to fix and then appeal and get it sorted. So it's really important though to check and make sure that these types of headers are correctly placed and that ads are not underneath anything that's confusing to users. And then continuing on that, ads that are too close to navigation are also violations. So as you can see on the left, the next page button is really close to that ad. There's a few strategies that you can use to fix this. One is just adding more padding, some space between them, really to differentiate the two. Another is putting one of those labels that we saw in the previous slide, so advertisements or sponsored links, to really show like this is an ad. And then another is just to put a few lines of content. Again, that'll really separate it, make it obvious that clicking on the ad is not going to get you to the next page, or a mouse won't accidentally, click on the wrong one, especially on mobile where it's small. And then on the right, it's a similar issue. So you've got an ad that's really close to the menu. And again, same kind of strategies, adding padding, you can put a label, anything like that. But I want to point out that on the far right, it says more with a little arrow underneath it that causes a drop down. Drop down menus cannot cover ads, that's not allowed. So again, you have to make sure that there's enough spacing so that there's space for that drop down menu to show. Or another option is to put the ad above the menu with some padding so that you don't even have to worry that the drop down is going to cover it.
So you can't implement Google Ads in a way that disguises them as content. This includes formatting the content to look similar to the ads. So in this example, the Ezoic green logo would be content, but the Ezoic black logo is the ad. And as you can see, it's in line with it. It's very confusing. It can cause accidental clicks because users are intending to engage with your content, but instead are engaging with the ads, and that's not good. So what we recommend is either putting the ad in its own line or adding labeling, padding, that sort of thing, just to make it very clear that this is an ad and not content to be engaging with. So offering any incentive to your users to encourage to click on the ads is not allowed. So in this example, it's a pop-up that says click all the ads, and it's asking your users to do that. That's not allowed, but sometimes it can be really simple where you put a sentence at the bottom of your page and it says, hey, the site is up and running only because of the ad revenue, so please click the ads. That would also not be allowed, so something to be watching out for. As a rule of thumb, if the page doesn't have any of the bulk of your content, there shouldn't be ads on it. So this includes ads on thank you, exit, or login pages. If you have a search feature on your site and your users are looking for something, but for some reason no search results show up, or it's an error page that shows up, that also can't have ads on it. The reason for this is because it's very confusing for the users, because when they're searching for something and then they only see ads, again, they may accidentally click on all the ads, attempting to find that content. So they're engaging with the site in a way that wasn't intended. So avoid ads on error pages or no search result pages.
So next is ads in pop-up and pop-under windows. And this policy is sort of split into two. So one is that Google Ads can't be in any window that's not initiated by the user, or any window that doesn't have navigational features like a back button or a URL field. So obviously that falls under pop-under and pop-ups. So they can't be placed into those types of ad spaces. But the second part of the policy is that Pop-ups are allowed from another network on a site that shows Google Ads. So if the main site shows Google Ads, it's still allowed to have a few pop-ups that are not Google. But a site showing Google Ads can have no pop-unders, even if they're not Google. So even if they're coming from another network, it's really important to make sure that those types of ads are not showing on your site if you want to show Google Ads. So next we're going to get into content policies. And we're going to start with some of the Google Webmaster policies that really cover some of the important aspects of content on Google sites. So the first is that sites need to add value. So publishers can't create multiple pages, domains that have the exact same content. So this could be, a publisher owns 2 sites with the exact same content across it. Obviously, you can't monetize both. You could only monetize one. Because otherwise it's just using the 2 sites to add more ads. And this is the same for on a domain as well, multiple pages with the same article. And this can happen accidentally as well. This is one of those things, maybe you post an article that you wrote and then a year later you post the same one for some reason and forget that you had it before. That's still considered duplicate content. It does happen, and sometimes violations will happen because of it. But again, just like removing one of them or taking off the monetization from one of the pages will fix that issue. It is important to review your content regularly. The next is that publishers should be providing unique and relevant content in the first place that gives the user a reason to visit your site. So this is sort of the same vein. You really want to provide valuable inventory to your user, give them that reason why your site is the best one for this information. And the last one I think is not as common, but avoiding doorway pages is important. This gives an example of affiliate programs, just sort of promoting affiliate programs with little or no original content. My example is, let's say there's a menu site and the article says, this is the best roast beef recipe you'll ever have. And then the content is just hyping up how great this recipe is, but ultimately there's just a link to another domain. And you don't actually own that content. So really there's no added value. There's no reason for the user to go to this site just to get to the other site versus going to the other site completely. And this is considered a doorway page. It's just a way to sort of monetize someone else's content without adding any value.
Okay, so at the end of last year, summer of last year, Google made some pretty major changes to their policies. So there's now 2 types of categories. One is Google publisher policies and then Google publisher restrictions. So content that was previously not allowed at all to show Google ads now is. It would fall under this restricted category. And this is types of content that won't cause AdSense disablements, but you may see a reduction in revenue because the content isn't as attractive to all advertisers. So we're going to go more into what these Google publisher restrictions are and some of the changes that we've seen. But as a reminder, content on your page includes anything from advertisements to links to your users' comments. So if your users are commenting things that aren't compliant with Google policies, it's really important to monitor that and remove those comments if needed. So as a refresher, this is a list of content that is absolutely not allowed to show Google ads on. And it will cause serious violations, if not terminations of your Google accounts if this content is on there. So an example of this is, let's say you have an article about how bad torrent sites are. That's totally allowed. But if you link directly to a torrent site, that would cause a violation. So it's something to be aware of. Another example is, let's say you have a forum site that discusses a broad range of topics. If one of the topics happens to be something promoting discrimination, that would also be a major violation. So it's really important that you're continuously monitoring your site and making sure that everything on your site is compliant with Google policies, assuming you want to monetize with Google products. Some of these are really straightforward, but there are some that are a little bit more of a gray area. So we're going to go into those too.
So a really common page level violation is valuable inventory. And this is also sort of broken down into 2 parts. So one is that ads cannot exceed the content on your site. And you see this sometimes with like a slideshow site, maybe a big image, like maybe one line of content and then a bunch of ads around it. So there's more ads than content. So it is really important to make, content is king here. Add content that's substantial, that's valuable to the user. Give the user a reason to like flip through more pages, that kind of thing. And then I think what we see a lot as well is this other part of valuable inventory, which is you can't mirror, frame, scrape, or rewrite content from another source. So mirroring is really, that one tends to be more on purpose. That's literally like taking a site, the whole layout, the content, everything, and copying it. But scraping sometimes is not quite as purposeful, but it is taking content from another source and using it as your own. And scraping does include giving back credit to the original writer of that content. So even if you take the article and at the bottom you give the source and a link back, that's still not allowed because that content is still being passed off as your own essentially and not adding value. And that content is already on the internet, like it's not yours to be monetizing. It does happen sometimes where you may think a few articles are really valuable to your user on your site, and that's okay. But the vast majority of the content on your site should be original, written by you, or adding a lot of value to your user. And another violation is any type of hacking or cracking. So Google Ads can't be on sites that provide unauthorized access to software servers and websites. And we see this a lot with sort of a YouTube to MP3 converter and some other converters as well. So YouTube doesn't allow like downloads of their videos or or songs into MP3s. So that type of conversion is providing that unauthorized access, and it's not allowed. Tools are allowed though with Google products. That's not a problem. Calculator sites, like there's lots of tools that are totally fine. If you're not sure if the tool that you're providing is allowed, please reach out to your account manager or reach out to us and we can take a look and let you know if it works.
So we're going to go back and talk a little bit more about those publisher policies versus restrictions again. So as I mentioned previously, last year, guns and gun parts and related products were not allowed at all to be monetized with Google, but now they've switched over and are allowing it. Again, this content is allowed, so it won't cause a disablement of your AdSense account, but you may see and may receive less revenue for this type of content because it's less attractive to advertisers than non-restricted content would be. So you can choose to monetize this type of content, but again, you may see that reduction in revenue. So it's something to pay attention to and be aware of.
So sexual content is one of, I think, also the bigger changes when policy went from not being allowed from a violation to policy and restricted, because it used to all sort of fall under adult content. So still, this policy stuff is still a violation. So anything including graphic sexual text, image, audio, video, or games. So that includes pornography, including cartoon porn. Anything with non-consensual themes, anything that can be promoted as a sexual act in exchange for compensation. So this is prostitution, escort services, even intimate massages are included. But I think that this part is pretty clear cut. I think it's a little perhaps less clear in the restricted. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So restricted content. So this is, again, allowed or it won't cause violations. But again, there may be fewer advertisers, so revenue may be lower. But this is content that includes nudity, close-ups of private parts, talking about fetishes, sexual entertainment. So I think some of this, it may be a little bit confusing between what is considered restricted and policy. There is like sort of a fine line when you talk about, again, like pornography and nudity and some of these restrictions. So it is important to really go through these policies if you have content that falls into it and sort of determine which one it falls under. So you may not want to make this type of content the focus of your site just because, again, it can cause lower revenue, but again, it's not a violation. If you're not sure, we've said this 5 times, if you're not sure if it's allowed, you can reach out to us and we can take a look and let you know if we think it's a restriction or if it's a violation. With sexual content, I would say we tend to err on the side of caution, and I would suggest you do too, just because this kind of adult content can cause serious violations. But again, this was a big change to allow more types of content with Google products, which is really interesting.
So Google really values family-friendly content, which is why shocking content is restricted now. But shocking content can include anything from blood, guts, gores, or crime scene photos, or videos of car accidents. That type of content would be considered shocking content. But adding to that, so is profane language. So swearing will affect your ability to fully monetize the site. So again, something to be aware of. For explosives, some examples include discussion of bombs, grenades, or explosive fireworks. And then any content that talks about bomb making or equipment intended for 3D printing of parts of explosive devices, that would also fall under this restricted category. So I think for these categories are pretty straightforward, unlike the gray area that Marissa was just talking about. But again, if you have questions, just email us. I already talked about guns, but guns and gun parts are now restricted, so that's allowed. But examples of other weapons for that category, that would be anything from tasers, brass knuckles, pepper spray. It can also include knives like switchblades or throwing axes. Essentially, the other weapons is any type of weapon designed to injure another human, or another being, I should say. So it is allowed, but again, you may receive less revenue for these types of discussions depending on the advertisers. So with weed becoming legal in more and more states, we're seeing a rise in this type of content. For example, reviews of cannabis coffee shops or forums on how to get the best quote unquote high. So discussion about weed and any substance that alters your state of mind is now considered restricted and is allowed by Google, which is a huge change from last year when this was not allowed at all. But it also includes discussion about products, instructions, sales of these types of drugs. For unapproved pharmaceutical and supplements, if you refer to the AdSense support page, they actually provide a really extensive list of all the unapproved pharmaceuticals and supplements. So I highly recommend referring back to that list if you have a discussion on your site about these. For tobacco sale or misuse, this is any content that facilitates the online sale of alcoholic beverages and or promotes irresponsible alcohol consumption. So we listed some examples, but binge drinking is one of them, or discussions about drinking games or that sort of thing. This is a really interesting topic because previously it was any mention of alcohol on your site was not allowed to be monetized with Google. I was working with a publisher whose site focused on reviewing alcoholic beverages and rating them. And that site had been live for many, many years, but he could never get approved in AdSense because of the content of the site. And then within last year, he reapplied and got approved. So now he's able to monetize the site. So these changes have been really helpful for a lot of publishers whose sites focus on these topics. And he's doing well, so. For tobacco, this content is any content that again promotes the sale of tobacco and tobacco-related products, and it does include e-cigarettes.
So this is the last policy restriction we're going to go over. It's online gambling. So online gambling is considered anything that allows users to participate in online real money gambling. Or anything where there's an exchange of something of value. So even, betting for points, and those points can later buy actual items, that's included. So these are online casinos, lottery ticket purchases, sports betting, all of that. So those are considered restricted. However, there are some casino gambling type content that is allowed completely, not restricted. And that's really informational based. So that would be, information on how to play roulette, how to play blackjack, just like the games themselves, without links to anything offering gambling. And then another one that we see a lot that again is completely fine is lottery sites that talk about the lottery in different countries, like what the amount is at, or the winning lottery numbers from the last week or the last month or any of that, that's all totally fine. It's just when there's actual money involved that it becomes restricted.
Okay, so now that we've talked about all these ad placements and content policies, what can you do to avoid AdSense violations? Well, one, like we mentioned, monitor your ad placements and make sure that they're always compliant with Google policies. Two, avoid content that falls under the Google policies. You don't want those violations. You don't want your AdSense disabled. As you know, Google's goal is to ensure a healthy digital advertising ecosystem. So everything you do should be for the benefit of the user visiting your site. And I can't stress this one enough. It's so important that content is original and family friendly. I know for a lot of you, your sites are your passion projects. So just continue providing content that's useful, interesting, adds value to your users. We mentioned that in the Webmaster policies, where you should be creating a site that adds value, and users should want to visit your site first. What makes your site super special that they're going there first? Another thing you can do is monitor your traffic and understand what normal traffic patterns look like for your site. I know we didn't touch on traffic, but you need to ensure that your traffic is super high quality and coming from real humans as opposed to bots. If you see increases in page views or changes in traffic sources, investigate and try to understand what's happening, what's going on with your site. If you're buying traffic, ensure that it's from high quality sources. And when in doubt, ask us for help. Marissa and I love discussing AdSense violations. So if you don't know, just ask us. We're going to provide our emails at the end of this presentation. And your account managers are familiar with your site. They understand your traffic and are willing to deep dive what's going on or deep dive ad placement issues or whatever it is. We're here to help. We love to help. Okay, so because you were listening to this presentation, you were entered into a raffle, and I think Shelby has the winner, Jared James. So Shelby will reach out to you at the end of this presentation. And then, like promised, here are our emails. If you have any questions, just send them to us, either or, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you.